Welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. On today's podcast, we'll take a peek inside one of Superior's grandest buildings, the Grand Opera House. Buildings designed by Carl Wirth anchored downtown Superior in the late 1800s. His most elaborate design was the Grand Opera House on Belknap Street. The lavish theater opened in 1890 and entertained Superior residents nearly 50 years before it was destroyed by fire. We'll discuss the history of the Opera House and its next-door neighbor, the New Jersey Block. Also designed by Wirth, the New Jersey Block is now known as the Globe News Building. Helping us dive into the story today is local historian Teddy Meronek. Hello, Teddy.
Hi, Maria.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, the Grand Opera House was indeed grand?
It was grand. And as I've said, if there's a building that I could rebuild in Superior, it would be the Grand Opera House.
Why? What was it that set it apart?
Well, it was so exotic because it was of Moorish design. So it had all kinds of fancy exterior decorations and stained glass and looked like an opera house in a big city. I think I'd mentioned earlier that Carl Wirth, who's the artist who painted the murals at the Superior Public Library, in an interview he did for the newspaper, he said if Superior could rebuild the opera house, he was very fond of that painting. He said if Superior could rebuild that opera house, people from around the state would be coming to Superior just to see it.
Because it was just such a beautiful building.
It was a beautiful building and very unique. Probably unlike anything that I think Wirth, well, certainly unlike anything Wirth had done in Superior.
Right, because there are examples of his work all through Superior still. The Carnegie Library, the first one.
Yep.
And the Roosevelt Terrace.
Roosevelt Terrace. He did the Empire Block. He did the Maryland Block. He did Globe News. He was really the architect of Superior.
But this one was a step above.
Right. And I believe his brother designed the one in Duluth, if I'm not mistaken.
An opera house in Duluth?
Yes. And I don't know if it's still standing or part of it's still standing there, but if you look at old pictures, you can see a slight similarity between the two places. But Superior's is much grander.
Much grander. How much did it cost to build?
$75,000.
That was a lot back then,
right? So, if somebody has $75,000 to give, maybe we could rebuild it. I can't even imagine what it would cost today. I can't even imagine.
How many seats did it have?
1,200.
Wow.
Although I read a couple articles that said 1,300 people had attended these various events. I'm thinking, wasn't that against fire code?
Standing room only.
Right.
And was it for operas mainly or all kinds of entertainment?
It was for everything you could imagine. The first performance, which was on August 11th, 1890, was an opera called Martha. Not one I have heard of, but apparently it was a big hit.
Okay.
And all of Superior's finest people went to see it.
According to the article that you
According to the article I read in the newspaper. And I had several questions. First of all, who were Superior's finest people? I wanted to know that. But the one thing that's always puzzled me about events like that is, in 1890, how did you get to them? There could be a streetcar, but if you're in your best finery, really, how do you get there? Do you come by horse and carriage? And where did they park them? I have so many questions. I just, I don't understand.
And the articles did not help you.
No,
with
they
that.
did not elaborate on how people got to the Grand Opera House because, of course, there's no automobiles and the only transportation would be streetcar. Mm-hmm. So you either walked or you brought your own vehicle, horse and carriage.
There were service tunnels connecting all of those buildings at one time.
I
don't think people used them.
That was the sort of urban legend, was that the Grand Opera House and the West Superior Hotel, which was right across the street on the site where the library now stands, that they had a tunnel underneath where the performers would walk over from their rooms at the hotel underground and go to the opera house so they didn't get wet or didn't get snowed on when they were ready to perform. But it was just for heating pipes because there was a heating plant on the site of the hotel that heated both the opera house and the New Jersey Block, the Globe News. So they all had a sort of a centralized heating plant there at the West Superior Hotel. No people, as far as I know, although I've heard many, many, many stories that say, oh, yes, they did. But I never heard anybody say, I walked under there.
So what were some of the other events that came to the Grand Opera House? Any big names?
Well, I think in one of our previous podcasts we talked about a wrestling match that took place there.
A wrestling
Wrestling
match in an
match.
opera house?
Yes, they did, and they had boxing, and they had high school graduations there,
Oh.
especially in the days when one of the high schools in town was Blaine.
Mhm.
They had from kindergarten on through high school, and they apparently did not have an auditorium of their own, so they would have graduations there. And I also have read Central and Nelson Dewey High School would sometimes have graduation ceremonies at the Opera House. There were local groups that actually performed plays at the Opera House to raise money, and they had a huge memorial service for President McKinley after he was assassinated. That was one of the events that there were 1,300 people there. And Teddy Roosevelt, when he was running for president again in 1912 on the Bull Moose ticket, he spoke there.
Really?
So it's been a lot, but mostly it was vaudeville acts
Mhm.
and things like that, and opera companies that came through.
Okay. Did it have like a skybox area as well as, or was it all just one sloping?
No, it had the general auditorium, and then there was a balcony, and then there were boxes for
Along the
people
sides?
along the sides.
Okay.
Yeah, very elegant. And it was supposed to be fireproof.
Was it?
Yeah, it was fireproof.
How did that play out?
That didn't work out really well for them. The terrible fire in 1909. When I look at the pictures, because I have seen pictures of that, looks like, well, the place looks pretty destroyed to me.
Oh, no.
But they did manage to save the outside walls, and they redid the inside. But it lost a lot of its charm because all the decorations on the roof were destroyed in the fire.
Okay.
So then 2 years later, they had another fire.
Really?
Yes.
From the same cause?
Nah, I think something different. They actually at one time had a fireman on duty there all the time from the Superior Fire Department.
Really?
Yeah, when there were people in the building for performances.
Why were they using lighting that was unsafe, or were they using
Probably, I guess. Electricity was rather new.
Right. Okay.
I think mostly because it was wood construction too, but there are very few pictures of the interior, the original interior.
I was going to ask, what did it look like?
I wish I could see it because it sounded wonderful, but no photos.
What did it say? What was it
Oh,
like?
they had Russian carpeting, and as fabulous, absolutely fabulous materials were used throughout the building. Velvets and all of this. There are some pictures when it was rebuilt after the 1909 fire, which they redid it a lot. Well, of course they had to.
Right, because everything was gone.
So it didn't look like the original, but they had, I guess in the basement, they had dressing rooms down there.
Okay.
And they had dressing rooms behind the stage. And I found one picture of the interior where the cast is in rehearsal. I don't know if they're backstage or if they took this from the auditorium and they're actually sitting on stage, and you can see the things behind stage, but that's the only picture I've ever seen of the interior, which is really sad.
Mm-hmm. Would
But
have been nice to get that kind of bird's eye. This is what it would have felt like to be there.
I'm surprised that Wirth didn't take pictures, that he didn't have someone take pictures of his designs, but maybe he was just building one building after another and he didn't have time to have photos taken. Yeah, he was busy, but I would love to see that. And then when after that 1911 fire, the outside changed completely.
So the 1911 fire also damaged the exterior.
Yeah, and they redid it. And John Bach, who I consider the next sort of architect of Superior, was the one who redesigned the theater.
Okay. And I understand there was a lot of sorrow about losing a particular piece of equipment during one of those fires. A vacuum?
Oh, I didn't read about that. You know something I don't, Maria.
a $300
Oh, that's
vacuum
right. Yes, I remember that. Yes. Yeah.
that was used to clean the upholstery on the seats.
Yes.
Got lost, and the building owners were very sad to have
You're
lost
right.
that in the fire.
And the funny thing is, when they did the remodel, they had to replace the seats with bigger seats. I guess for
Why
the
bigger?
bigger size of people. I don't know.
Okay.
When it was first built, they compared it to the Opera House in Duluth, and
Mhm.
they said that, well, it was much nicer because people could get around better in this compared to the cramped quarters in Duluth. It's kind of funny, this back and forth rivalry between Duluth and
Mhm.
Superior. But yeah, I wish I could have seen the interior.
Oh, that would have been, yeah,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Now, compare it to the Princess Theater, which Superior is working on
Mhm.
putting back in place and making it a viable theater again. Bigger, smaller than the Princess
Oh,
Theater?
huge. The Palace was a huge theater.
Was that as big as the Grand?
I bet they could seat almost as many people.
Okay,
I
because some
think,
listeners might have seen or
yeah,
been in the Palace, because that didn't go down until the early
2000s,
2000s.
yeah. Probably the Grand was built at the right time because there was nothing to compete with it. There weren't
Mhm.
movies yet.
Right.
So they were the only game in town, really and truly, that they had live performances and you could go see them there. And then after that, little movie theaters started opening up, very
Mhm.
small ones. But I now I think back and I wonder why they built the Palace in 1917, because you were really on the cusp of movies taking over everything. There were silent movies then, but that was a huge vaudeville theater,
Right.
and then they also the Broadway theater, which was designed by the same people who designed the Palace. That was another huge venue for something that was going out of style, vaudeville.
Mhm.
The Marx Brothers appeared at the Broadway
Really?
theater, yeah, and on
And the
their
Grand
vaud.
Opera House was still open when
It
those
was,
were built, right?
and they had converted to movies. They were known as the Plaza.
The Plaza.
Yes, after I don't know if it was the second fire. These buildings were owned by the Land and River Improvement Company. The Grand Opera House was built and owned by the Land and River Improvement Company, which was a group of investors that General John Henry Hammond had put together that were investing their money in this town, and they were building everything from the sewer system to the Grand Opera House and
Oh.
owning it. And in the early 1900s, they sold it to a group of investors, which among them was John T. Murphy, who owned the Telegram.
Interesting.
So he invested in the Grand Opera House along with Robert Kelly, who we have talked about before, who was the person who created Superior's Parks. He was park commissioner, and he was also one of the investors. And I think they sold it. I can't remember if they sold it just before the fire or just after, but the Land and River Improvement Company had owned it until then.
Okay. And then the final fire, the third fire,
No,
was what, 1939?
39.
And that was the death knell for the Opera House.
For the building. The Moose organization had the biggest space in there. Also, the May Furniture Company. Lucille May, eventually, whose family owned the business, eventually became director of the Superior Public Library. And then there was this other gentleman who, Mr. Brashaw, who had sort of a music, I don't know if you want to call it a music place. He had a huge collection of records and music scores, and I believe he taught piano to people. And he would have like a Saturday night get together where people would sit around and listen to music and talk about it.
Oh.
He lost everything.
Oh, no.
But the people of Superior rallied together and bought him replacements. Certainly couldn't replace what he had, but bought him material that he could use when he opened his new studio. Or maybe it was like a salon. That's what I always think it's like in France, where people would get together and talk about things, so they call them salons. But then he had another space. I think it was in the building where Angie's Closet is now. I think he had the upstairs there, and he lived there, and he had his music and his pianos up there.
And there is still some of the facade of the Grand Opera House there, it was where Earth Exchange is now.
Right. When I had been in Earth Exchange the first time and had gone down the basement, I knew then that was part of the building. But until we did the tour of the Princess a few months ago in the summer, where it was nice and you could walk around outside, at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, and we went back and we looked at the back of the building that Earth Exchange is in and saw how much of the Opera House is really still there. Kind of surprised me to see that there was, something beyond the basement there. So I'm thinking if someone's got some money and they want to donate it, we could rebuild that Opera House.
We'll put a pin in that one.
Right. But it's funny, the The lot next to it, between Ogden and Tower, that lot, it stayed empty for years and years and years. There was never anything built beyond the Opera House on that block. Now there is. The Salvation Army is there. I think that was where May Department Store moved after the fire. And I think, well, maybe that's where they put the elephants when they came to perform at the Opera House.
They had elephants there?
They had the Lockhart Company, and they did vaudeville. They did a vaudeville tour, and they had comics and singers and whatever, and elephants. And they had 5 elephants that came to Superior.
Really?
Yes.
Now, the New Jersey block, which is still standing, the Globe News building now, had a big connection to the Grand Opera House, right?
Right. It was built around the same time. And initially, the drugstore that was in the building was called the Opera House Drugstore.
I've heard it was called Hadley's.
And there were 3 generations of Hadleys who owned the business. They didn't own the building. That's the thing, people think, well, they own the entire building, but it was usually owned by a group of investors. And I think I found an article in 1913 where it was sold for $100,000. The entire building was sold for $100,000 to a group of Boston investors. So there were still people from outside of Superior who were investing in real estate in Superior.
So it was an Opera House drugstore. What could you find there?
I think they actually had a pharmacist, so it was, a pharmacy. But what's interesting about the building is that there were additional storefronts on both Tower and Belknap. And the one on Belknap, almost from the beginning, one of them was a flower shop. And the first person who ran the flower shop was a woman, Miss Lizzie O'Sullivan.
Wonderful.
And she ran that for many years. And then she sold it to another woman and her husband, a Mrs. Ashby, who did all the flowers for, I believe, ship launchings at Globe. And she also did flower arrangements that were purchased to bring out to Mrs. Calvin Coolidge when she and President Coolidge were staying out in Brule.
Really?
And they had to go through security before they could deliver the flowers because I guess people were looking for bombs in those days. I don't know. But the funniest thing I read about that business was they had a delivery truck. And of course, it had no heat in it. So in the cold weather, they would put a kerosene stove in the truck to keep the flowers from freezing. I thought, that sounds a tad bit dangerous to me, but I guess they did okay.
They managed to deliver.
They did. And on the other side, on the Tower Avenue side, there was a place for many years that was a sweet shop, a candy store. And they had, I guess, terrific displays. One time they built a whole bowling alley scene out of the candy that they had in the store. But they also sold cigars in the store, too. It wasn't just a candy store. And another time they did, they would just have these fanciful things like a whole train set built out of candy. So they were on the Tower Avenue side.
What was the name of it?
I can't remember the name of it.
Okay, but it was a candy shop.
It was a candy shop, yeah.
Were very artistic with their candy.
They were very, yes. And then, but my favorite part about the building is the upstairs apartments, which I never knew about when I was growing up. I never even thought about what was up there. I thought, well, storage, but there were 6 apartments and they each had their own private entrance and they each had at least one fireplace, if not more. And they were rented to the wealthy and aristocratic of Superior.
Wealthy and aristocratic?
Yes, when they first opened, that was what was written about them. There were 6 apartments.
Right.
And I think they were 8 rooms each.
Wow, that's a big apartment. Looking at that building, how would you fit that many? It must be very large upstairs.
Very small, maybe very small rooms.
Yeah.
But they had all the modern conveniences, electricity, running water. You could have a gas stove, and they said all the modern conveniences to make life worth living.
Okay.
Yeah.
Life worth living.
Life worth living.
Okay. Do you know when it became Globe News? Because we know it as the Globe News building now. Has it been, it obviously wasn't that from the get-go. When did it change?
No, I wish I knew the answer to this. But I did a lot of digging when we started talking about doing this podcast and when did the sign on the building appear. And I have read this in many histories of the building that people have done for newspapers or magazines or whatever that became Globe News in the 1940s. It didn't become Globe News in the 1940s. I am here to say I have the evidence that it didn't.
When did it become?
The building was owned by the business was run by the Hadleys until about 1948. was the third generation they got out of it. Went up for sale again in 49, and it was sold to the Tower Paint Company. So it was actually a paint store for at least 2 or 3 years, because then I went to the city directories and I found in, I believe it's 1952 maybe, was the first listing for Globe News.
Okay.
There were no listings for Globe News in the 1940s. And since I found the verification in the newspaper that the building was being sold in 1949 to Tower Paint, we know that it wasn't Globe News until the 50s. And then someone told me that they thought the sign came from Globe Shipyard.
Right.
So I went through all of the newsletters at the library from Globe Shipyard looking for a picture to verify that the sign was out at the shipyard. I never saw a photo of it, but that could be a true story. I just don't know.
Right.
And I did find, this is how I can't leave these things alone. I went through building records, and there was a building permit taken out like in 55 for Globe News. And I thought, did you need a building permit to put up a sign? I'd have to go look at the full record, but I have an index to the building permits. And I thought, I don't know, but I haven't been able to track down a news story.
So it's a mystery where the sign came from and when it appeared.
When it appeared, I would assume, and someone found for me an article from the Peptimist from 1953. There was an ad in the Peptimist from Globe News, so it was known as Globe News right away. So I'm thinking, I bet the sign went up when the store opened, because otherwise, unless they had a painted sign or something and not a neon sign.
But neon would have been. It's conceivable that sign was that old.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I'm sure it was. Hard to find pictures, though, or anything about it. I don't know.
I suppose someday people will say, I wish they'd taken more pictures back then,
too. People always say that. Yes. Well, I say that about my own life. I think, why didn't I take a picture of this? Where now everyone has a camera all the time, so it's much easier. I just hope they last. Right. And they're saved somewhere.
But yeah, it's a good reminder to yourself. You think you'll never want to see what your house looked like back in 10 years ago, but take a picture.
Yeah.
You might look back and go, aw.
I know. I wish someone had gone down every decade in Superior's history and taken a picture of every street to show what it looked like, at least Tower Avenue and Belknap. Like, take a picture of between 11th and 12th and whatever. Just keep taking pictures so we know. But you just don't think of that stuff.
And then you'll see shops come in and shops leave and things change. And
you don't realize how much it's changed.
Right. Or you look at those, the maps, the Google Maps, and people have driven by your house and it was, 10 years ago.
Right.
You'll be, oh, hey, I remember that car. That used to be mine.
Yeah. So, it's too bad, because it would be nice. At least then you would be able to get a good idea of when actually the sign appeared.
So if anyone has any photos of either the sign at Globe Shipyards to prove it came there, or when it showed up on the building. Right.
And you better have a date on that photo.
That's not going to believe you.
That's my pet peeve. Oh, I have this picture. When did you take it? Well, it could have been. It's like my quest for when did the Supremes appear at the Superior Curling Club. The Supreme singing group. Apparently they were there, but no one can remember exactly when. And I've been through so many newspapers.
Interesting.
Maybe 64.
Right. They can say, well, here's a picture.
Right.
When was it?
They didn't even have pictures. They just have memories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But that makes it fun. In some ways, of course, the digital age is wonderful. Everything's digitized and you can search so easily. But there's just something about tracking down something when you have no idea, really, and you just have to keep looking. So I'm almost ready, since I know that Globe appeared in 1953. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to go through every page of the telegram. For some, because the library has this a great index of newspaper stories, but 1953 must not have been a year that they were really concentrating on it, because there's nothing about that.
Huh. Well, yeah, it could be a fun search.
Yeah, that's what people always say.
Not so fun?
If you find something, it's fun. If you don't. But I always get sidetracked, usually by the ads. Unless somebody comes forward with the actual dates, I will continue this search, because I really want to know when it turned into Globe News officially with the sign.
All right, but not the 40s.
Not the 40s.
Nope, it was the 50s.
Unless Tower Paint was using it on their building, I would say probably not.
All right. Well, it's a mystery yet to be solved.
Yes, that's what history is. Harry Truman once said, the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. And that's true.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing some of your history with us.
Thank you, Maria.
Very fun. All right. Thanks for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.